I'm the Chief of Staff for American Chorus in the town of Braintree and Director of Operations. So just wanted to say thank you all so much for coming out tonight, for your involvement in this process, and to Councilor Maglio for all of her advocacy on behalf of the East Braintree neighborhood. So just curious, by show of hands, how many of you were with us last week at East Middle School? That's great, almost all of you. And then same show of hands, how many of you are residents of Braintree? And then new to not at last week's meeting and a non-Braintree resident. Just trying to understand the landscape. I am new, working in the town of Braintree, trying to make it sure I have the opportunity to meet all of you. So thank you for being here, and to the Clean Harbors team. They've been very responsive to our questions, and I know that a lot of you here tonight have many, and I expect a deep dive into the IRAC report that so many of you are so well educated upon. So just wanted to introduce myself and thank you all for your public involvement. It's a community process, and your time and your advocacy is appreciated on behalf of the town of Braintree. Thank you.
Great. Okay. All right, so we're a go. I'm going to introduce Rebecca Underwood, who's the president of Clean Harbors. There you go.
Great. Thank you. So so first we just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. We're happy to be here. It's been a long time coming, but I think we're really excited to kind of really talk through and getting to this point. So with no further ado, as you can see the agenda. Oh, you cannot see the agenda. Hold on a second.
Sorry.
Nope.
Here,
Maybe we can do that.
and it is not working.
Well, I guess you took this out of it,
No.
because that was moving on my computer.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
So maybe,
Any?
hold on. Yeah, go put that back in. Hold on.
Do the dongle.
Yep, hold on.
Oh.
That's why it wasn't coming up. We thought that was the flash drive. Hold on.
Oh, I see. Oh, and it was moving on your computer. Little technical difficulties.
All right. Go for it. We'll make this interactive. Yeah, so the agenda tonight, we're going to do some introductions. We'll talk about who's here from Clean Harbors, who's here from Tetra Tech. Thank you. We'll go over the overall meeting format. So we want to just kind of set some ground rules and make sure everybody understood we want to give everybody the opportunity to speak tonight. We think it's important to hear from as many people as possible. We'll talk a little bit about, again, Clean Harbors overview. It sounds like many of you have been here before, so some of this may not be you, but based on some of the feedback that we got, we wanted to maybe share a little bit about what we do in a little bit different way. And then we'll talk about the public involvement process. And then Tom Nuno, he's going to talk about the immediate response action plan that more specifically tonight that we have. And then we'll go into question and answers. So meeting format. The purpose, right? Really the purpose, and we want to make sure that we're really laser focused because I know people want to go deep tonight. So in order to do that, we've got to make sure that we focus on the scope that we want to cover. So we're going to cover our immediate response action completion plan report tonight. And that's the RTN number. So it's available. I'm sure many of you have seen it online. It's posted on the Mass DEP website. So ground rules, right? Again, we really want to hear from you. We want to have a good dialogue. So please make sure you ask your questions constructively and respectively. We want to give everybody the chance to speak. So just when you want to ask a question, come up to the microphone. Also, please silence your phones, right? We want to make sure that everybody can hear and listen appropriately. Submitting questions. So we've got a couple options, right? You can come up to the microphone, ask your questions live. You can submit via email to Tom Nuno at Tetra Tech. Also, you can send via postmail to Tom Nuno LSP at Tetra Tech, 100 Nicholson Road, Marlborough, Massachusetts. And we need your comments no later than July 2nd. That's when the notice period ends for collecting comments. So please, if you don't have a chance to do it tonight, please either email or via mail get that into us by July 2nd. And then the meeting length tonight, it's gonna be 2 hours. So that's the plan. We're not going to time people's questions, but we just ask that one question at a time. So you can ask your question, we can answer the question. And then just, please, you can come up as many times as you want to the microphone to ask questions. But we do have a 2-hour time limit for the meetings. Okay.
Yes, did you mention the one question format or not?
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay. And so just to introduce us real quick before we get into the next part. So my name is, as Tom mentioned, Becky Underwood from Clean Harbors. I'm the president of facilities for the company.
Hello, my name is Mike Foley. I'm the Senior Vice President of Facility Operations and have direct oversight of the Braintree facility.
And I'm Thomas Nuno, the licensed site professional for the work that we're doing here.
Okay, so as I mentioned, we wanted to kind of just remind and really share what Clean Harbors is all about. So our mission, go back.
Oh, sorry.
Yep. Our mission is really around sustainability. And again, we don't generate the waste, but we're here to make sure that that waste gets handled properly. We're creating a safer, a cleaner environment through the treatment, recycling, and disposal of hazardous materials. We really want to make sure that these materials do not get into your backyards, into the streets, into other places that if we didn't have a place to take it, again, the waste would just be building up and have no place to go. Next slide. So I wanted to kind of just, obviously we have a big company, we're a little bit complex, but I want to try to make it as simple as possible for everybody so you had a good understanding of what we do. Many of you had an opportunity to come visit our location and our facility, which again, we'll have opportunities to do that in the future. But basically, as we mentioned, we are a critical and a vital service to companies, industries, residents like yourselves for this area, not only in Braintree, in the surrounding Fore River Basin, as well as across New England. We take waste from schools, hospitals, retailers, from oil companies, right? Braintree Power and Light. We take all the backwater that comes out of the manholes. And we basically gather all the waste, right? We collect it and transport that waste then to what we call our transfer, storage, and disposal facilities, and that's a facility just like Braintree. So as Mike has said many times, at Braintree, we basically bring material in that we collect from the surrounding areas, we consolidate it, and sometimes ship it back out. So you'll hear us talk about truck to truck. So that's part of our truck to truck operation. We bring in material and sometimes we bulk it. So we take small things and put it into big things and then ship it to more effectively and safely to its end disposal location. And then in some cases we may do some treatment to the material. And again, then we properly and safely transport it to its final disposal destination. And last, we also do have recycling that we do in some cases. So like for used motor oil, we are the #1 used motor oil recycler in the world. Actually, one of our biggest facilities is in East Chicago. It's the biggest and largest re-refinery in the world, sitting in East Chicago. And we also have solvent recycling centers across the U.S. So roughly, from an asset perspective, we have over 100 facilities that do everything that I just described across the United States. Next slide. And I think the other important part, because a lot of people, sometimes don't associate Clean Harbors with, doing all the right things and really trying to save the environment. But as you heard from our mission, and I think you heard me say last time, listen to our actions, not just our words, and follow our actions. Well, as you can see here, I think our actions really tell the story. We, over the years and over many years, we are here to clean up the environment. That is what we do. That's one of our biggest missions. You can see some of these issues that have happened. That the Cape Cod, the Aldea tanker back in the day, you know, all the way through 9/11, Deepwater Horizon, Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Sandy, avian flu, right? We collected COVID. We're helping in East Palestine, right? You know, when issues happen out there, Clean Harbors is the company that people call so we can come and help clean it up. And it's so important that we do that, and we're one of the best at it. So with that, one of the things that we got a lot of questions about, and I wanted to share, as far as we recognize we had this incident, we're accountable for it, we take responsibility for it. That's why we're here today. And so we thought about, you know, what are the things we need to do to first and foremost make sure that something like this never happens again. So first and foremost, we're not taking the waste anymore. So the waste is not being collected from that customer. Obviously, we need to make sure that we're taking, and when we take material, that it's compliant material as well, so we can handle it properly. Also, we're doing a lot of upgrades to our facility. So we're adding additional fire hydrant. That's actually, we're you know, talking with contractors now. We're getting those things quoted so we can get that done. And that's going to be in alignment with, obviously, the new 8-inch pipe that's being implemented by the city across Downhill Avenue. We're also incorporating new fire suppression system that's under evaluation and design. So as you know, we have our bulk operating system that we have very comprehensive permanent fire suppression system. We continue to add more and more for these in-transit trucks that we have to handle. We're also using portable fire suppression systems until those updates are complete. I think, again, some of you have been out to the facility since the incident, and we've totally upgraded the entire area. We have all of that equipment on site, and it's ready to go when we're ready to get approval to move forward with that operation. We've added visible signage and markings beyond just what's on the trailer. So again, I think many of you heard a little bit about that. We're also conducting specialized training for Braintree. So we heard a lot from the residents that, you know, they want to make sure that, you know, that the fire department has the right, the proper, the safest training that they can have. And so we're setting up 24-hour HAZWOPER training for first responders, so not just firefighters, but any first responders, and also doing safety drills at our location to ensure that they're ready and prepared if something were to ever happen. We don't expect it to. Supporting evacuation planning efforts in coordination with the town. So we talked with Margaret several times. You know, in addition to the town working with MEMA, we also have offered our services and our relationships with Mass Maritime to basically, again, from a longer term basis, continue to look at making sure not just our own facility, which we've done a lot of work on, but we're also supporting the town and the community and working with other companies in conjunction to make sure that the overall town has a good evacuation plan, so we're participating in those activities. Also contributing to a comprehensive air monitoring program for the residents of the basin. So again, we're continuing to have those discussions. Obviously, it needs to be a holistic plan, and so we'll continue to work with the town and with the experts to make sure that we get the right solution in that space. All right. And so with that, I'm going to actually turn it over to Tom Nuno, and he's going to talk about the overall public involvement process. So, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you, Becky. And thank you all for coming here today. My name is Tom Nuno. I'm an LSP. And yes, I am an independent LSP. And just so you know, I take this job very seriously. LSPs are actually subject to the penalties of perjury, which means that, you know, if we make a decision, if we render a decision that is not appropriate, and it's found to be, you know, a serious problem, we can actually be brought up on charges for that. And so we take this job very seriously, and I want to tell you that I take it very seriously. I have personally been involved in cases where people are directly at risk, where they have young children that have you know, been exposed, and I've acted rapidly to mitigate those risks in the past. Sometimes in less than a week, we've installed remediation systems and things like that. So, just enough on the LSP process, but I want you to understand that it's a very good program. It is audited by Mass DEP, and all the LSPs take it very seriously, and LSPs are reprimanded all the time, all year long. So and nobody's immune from that. Okay, so let's talk about the public involvement plan process. This process was developed back in 1993 when the regs were developed. It's, you know, nowadays, since we have so much access to the internet, this process is a little bit outmoded, but it's good to see this much participation from the citizens of Braintree and Weymouth. As you know, our IRAC report.
And Quincy too. Quincy's
Oh,
also.
and Quincy, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And the IRAC report, which is, you know, the immediate response action report, was posted on the 17th of April, which was 2 months or 60 days after the initial event occurred, which is when it was mandated. The information is also posted on Mass DEP's website at that web address, and at the Thayer Public Library. Okay, so you should be able to find these reports at the Thayer Public Library. Likewise, we received the PIP petition on about April 4th, and this PIP meeting is being held today, and the public comment period will close 20 days hence from this meeting. Oh, guess I'm doing this. That's fine. All right, so this is the facility as you know it. It sits on the Fore River. My outline is going to discuss the MCP remedial action process, the fire event of February 16th, the response actions that we implemented to mitigate conditions there, and I'll touch on the impacts of the fire to air, water, soil, groundwater, and we'll talk a little bit about future activities under this program and the RCRA program. Okay, so what triggered this event? The fire obviously triggered the event. The goal of the IRA is to assess conditions, to evaluate if imminent hazard conditions exist, to mitigate risks as appropriate, and to eliminate the conditions that gave rise to the IRA. Now, imminent hazard conditions are not the same as like risk to residences. What we did, as you know, evaluate risk to residences as part of this this program. So anyway, as I mentioned, at the completion of the IRA activities, which, as I said, these are immediate actions that have to be taken to mitigate risk, and mostly to the employees at Clean Harbors and the immediate surrounding community. And at the completion of the IRA activities, site response actions will migrate to the RCRA program, which is an ongoing program that has been taking place since the 1990s at this site. So let's talk about the fire event of the 16th. Shortly before 10 p.m., 9 trailers staged at the loading dock were involved in a fire. The fire was extinguished within approximately 3 or 4 hours. due to the efforts of the Braintree Fire Department. The cause of this fire was attributed to auto ignition of some waste in one of the trailers. This one trailer burst into flames, and it quickly spread to 2 other trailers. Approximately 51 tons of materials were involved in the fire, including the truck bodies, the tires, the drums, all those materials. When we subtract out the materials that were recovered at the end of the fire, we estimate that the quantity consumed during the fire was about 18,786 pounds, or roughly a little over 9 tons. Approximately 330,000 gallons of firefighting water was applied to the trailers. The capture efficiency of the firefighting water is estimated to be quite high, as we've mentioned. And this is largely due to the impervious surfaces at the facility. The fact that there are berms and walls around this area that was able to collect and pond the water. That this is due to the fact that the stormwater system at the facility is intended to collect stormwater at the facility. It wasn't really built for this fire, but it did a very good job of collecting it. And as I've said in the past and other presentations, this is a very unique aspect of this fire in that in most cases when you have a fire, most of the water, almost all of the water just disappears. And in this case, we were able to collect a very large quantity of the water. Releases to the environment from this event included emissions to air and potential deposition of those emissions to residential soil, firefighting water discharges to the pavement and soil, firefighting water discharge to the neighboring property at Sitco through a berm system breach, and potential intermittent discharge to the Fore River that was observed as a white cloudy material. We've been very upfront about these releases. We know that these releases were unfortunate, and we take responsibility for them, but these releases were very small, as I'll come to describe. The emission to air were measured during and following the fire via handheld monitoring equipment. Monitoring during the fire included critical indicator parameters like total VOCs and carbon monoxide, which were monitored by Clean Harbors, Mass DEP, Braintree Fire Department, at the perimeter of the plant and also out in the neighborhoods. The post-fire monitoring was conducted by Tetra Tech, which included measurement of total VOCs and particulate matter. This data is included in the report. And the air and deposition modeling, which was conducted by GHD, modeled particulate matter emissions and then projected a reasonably good estimate of deposition that might have occurred during the fire. The results of the plume modeling and deposition to residential soil showed that localized measured concentrations of CO and total VOCs during the fire were very low due to meteorological conditions that night and the high heat of the fire. It was winter, the fire was burned very hot, hot enough to melt aluminum and hot enough to deform the steel in the trucks. And this caused the plume to rise very rapidly and disperse over a very large area. So the plume was very high, the wind direction was changing a lot, so it was widely dispersed. Let's see. So the modeling of particulate emissions that could have taken place during the fire showed that concentrations greater than those at nearby air monitoring stations were modeled. And by this, what do we mean? We mean that our model showed concentrations that are higher than anything measured at the metering stations, which is to be expected to some degree. The metering stations aren't going to be exactly in the right spot. So our plume model modeled this very high point of concentration. And then by modeling deposition from that very highest point of concentration, we found that the concentration of the most toxic constituents, which are dioxin and furans, was less than 1/2 of 1,000th of the mass DEP criteria for residential soil, which made us feel pretty comfortable that there's very limited risk associated with this mode of escape, I guess. So let's talk in a little bit more detail about this plume model. So we use a Gaussian plume equation, and I'm sure this is, well, I don't know, this is hopefully of interest to you. It's of interest to me. It's been used for over 50 years by engineers since the beginning of the NASA program. And dispersion parameters were estimated by observing the plume during the fire. So you watch this plume, you take some measurements of what the plume is doing, and you input those dispersion parameters into the model. The combustion mass, as I mentioned, based upon the mass balance of the trailer content, minus the recovered materials, was 18,186 pounds. And based on studies of similar fires that were conducted by GHD and others, 10% of this combustion mass would have resulted in emissions, of which 50% of chlorine compounds and at least 30% of fluorine and sulfur-containing compounds would likely have been scrubbed out by the firefighting water. These are things that the expert from GHD understood and used from his long experience, and I believe they are correct. The comparison of the modeled maximum plume concentration to actual PM2.5 and PM10 data, as I mentioned, noted that the maximum was modeled as 340 milligrams per cubic meter. As you can see, that's almost 10 times the concentrations that were measured at the stations. Okay, so we really used a highly conservative model, which means that we overestimated the plume concentrations by a large degree. This methodology, as I said, is highly conservative and produces higher than expected results. Okay, so this is kind of what I've just been describing. This is kind of a cartoon of sorts of the Gaussian plume illustration. But as I mentioned, the modeled maximum plume concentration was 340 micrograms per cubic meter, or more than 10 times the measured concentrations. The dioxin furan fraction was also calculated in a way that overestimates this fraction. What we did was we took the fractions of dioxin furan measured in soil, which was a place that we knew we had good results. We did this from the soil right where the fire was, like right under the trailers, where it would have been the highest concentration. And we divided this by other parameters like EPH and VPH, and then applied this ratio of dioxin furan to other contaminants like EPH, VPH, and total metals as taken to be the fraction of dioxin furan. Now, since we're not measuring all of the content of the soil, this grossly overestimates the fraction of dioxin and furan, considered to be a very conservative means of doing that. And we then used a deposition velocity of 1 centimeter per second, which was applied to the worst case plume concentration, as you can see. So, darn, sorry. So we took this worst case plume concentration right here. We modeled particle deposition to a square meter of soil, okay, to obtain a deposition rate, which occurred during the 3 to 4 hour fire, and then applied the dioxin furan fraction to the total particulate emission, and we yielded a soil concentration of 1 times 10 to the minus 8 milligrams per kilogram, which is 1/2 of 1,000th of the residential soil standard of 2 times 10 to the minus 5 milligrams per kilogram. I'm sure you're all almost asleep by now, but to me this is very exciting stuff. And I think it was a very good exercise that we did. And here's what I'll say about this, okay? So we're 1/2 of 1,000th of the standard for residential, or the residential soil standard. The residential soil standard is based on, obviously the method 1 standard is based on a 1 in 1 million excess cancer deaths. Okay, so what that means is that that's the excess, in other words, that's the point at which these concentrations are based. And so we live in a country where I'm sure you're aware of this, but the cancer rate is considerably higher than 1 in a million. And that is the point at which DEP regulates it at the 1 in a million mark, and we are less than 1,000th of that standard. Okay? So, what response actions do we implement to mitigate discharges to pavement and soil? Well, as we mentioned, firefighting water was pumped to 22,000 gallon frac tanks. That's how we came up with the $330,000 or 330,000 gallon volume of water. As it turns out, we pumped 300,000 gallons of water, we pumped and treated and delivered off-site 300,000 gallons. So you might ask, where did that other 30,000 gallons go? Well, some of it went to evaporation because it took us 45 days or so to pump and treat this material, which was shipped off-site in rail cars to New Orleans and Baltimore. And the other aspect of it is that a lot of this material was also, or a lot of the water was sorbed onto the activated carbon that was used to treat the material on site, and that's where the other losses occurred. The impacted soil areas that were investigated, included the loading dock area where the fires took place, the lunchroom building, and the berm area. The loading dock area is, I'm so sorry. Yeah, so let's see. The loading dock area was I'm sorry, right about here, it seems to be cut off. The lunchroom area was,
Vanessa's open 1.
yeah, it's kind of hard to see on this diagram. But these are very small areas on the site that were not paved, okay? So for the most part, the site is paved. There are a couple of little spots where there's a little bit of soil. We investigated these areas. This also included the berm area along the border with Sitco. And we looked at these, all the solids, sorbent materials, drums, paving, trailer bodies, tires, everything was disposed as hazardous waste. So you don't have to worry about where it went. It was all disposed as hazardous waste. And as a precautionary measure, we pumped an estimated 30,000 gallons of surface water from the Sitco property, which was next door, back to the Clean Harbors property, because as you know from our report, we noted that there was a slight breach in the berm between the two properties. Likewise, a sorbent boom was placed in the Fore River at the Hayward Brook discharge to capture surface water, which was removed, the boom being removed after about a month. So, what do we do about the firefighting water, the hazardous waste solids, the pavement cleaning? Well, Firefighting water was pre-treated, as I mentioned, through carbon and then shipped to Louisiana and then later Maryland for treatment. Went by rail cars, very safe. Pavement was power washed using detergents, and cleaning water was collected into the frac tanks for disposal. To date, we've shipped 696,905 pounds of solids, which is all the solids that we generated from this operation, and 300,000 gallons of wastewater, as I mentioned. Soil assessment and cleanup, and I apologize for this picture. I don't know how it got shifted like that. So there were, as I said, there were 3 areas that were impacted. 2 of these areas, the lunchroom and the berm soil area, were remediated via Vactor excavation. That's where we take a very giant, high-strength vacuum, and we literally suck the soil up into the Vactor, and it's then transported and disposed of as hazardous waste. And the 3rd area, which was the loading dock area, that area was repaved to limit exposure immediately. And I know there were some questions about, why the paving was needed to be replaced. It's not because it's not because the paving was dissolved by tons of solvent. It's because that's where the fire was. The fire melted the pavement, and that's why we had to replace the pavement. And I think I may have mentioned also that that the degree of penetration, due to the short duration of this fire and the limited exposure to these soil areas, we did look at these areas where the soil was. We installed borings through the pavement even after it was paved, just to make sure. And we discovered that the penetration of the firefighting water was no more than about 18 inches into the soil. And so the impacts to groundwater on a long-term basis would have been very, very small. Okay. So, we also did an imminent hazard assessment at these locations, where we look at the excess lifetime risk based on the short-term durations associated with imminent hazards, and we looked also at hazard index. For the lunchroom, that area was remediated to the S1 soil standards, and for the truck loading dock area and berm area, inside and outside the fence, we determined that the remaining soils after remediation did not exceed imminent hazard excess lifetime cancer risks or hazard indices. Thus, no imminent hazard exists at the site at this point. Other releases that may have occurred to the Fore River include this white, cloudy material that was observed around the time of the fire in the Fore River. The source of this material could not be determined, and I tried. I went, I dye tested. I think I described this last week for those of you that were here. We dye tested. We used, I contacted the Braintree Public Works Department. We looked at the sewers. There's, it's a very complicated system, and we could not determine definitively what the source of the white cloudy material was. Based on the lack of observed impacts from that white cloudy material, it was concluded that there are likely no long-term impacts from this release. And that is our belief, and we believe that many other scientists in similar situations would concur with this. The general assessment of impacts was that the fire was very short duration, 3 hours. Its high temperature created ideal circumstances for limited products of incomplete combustion and wide dispersion of the plume, thereby limiting local impacts. The firefighting water capture was exceptional, as I mentioned, and that limited impacts to soil, surface water, and groundwater. The soil impacts were limited due to the impervious nature of the site, the fact that everything's pretty much paved, and the groundwater impacts were virtually non-existent due to the limited time for water penetration during the course of the fire. And then finally, the potential off-site impacts from air emissions and contaminant impacts were shown to be well below significant risk levels for most toxic site contaminants. And you'll notice that I say, well below. There's never absolutely no risk, but we are so far below the applicable risk levels that these risks are infinitesimally small. So, what are our conclusions and future actions? Well, as I mentioned, there's no imminent hazard at the site. The conditions that gave rise to the immediate response action were resolved within the 60-day time frame, as I described. Because it took us a long time to treat the water and ship it via rail car, further activities were planned under what we call a release abatement measure. This is allowed under the MCP, and that's what we did. And then, at this point, all of the original wastewater is off the site. And then there's additional assessment activities that are ongoing at the Citgo property. And this is some work that Citgo and Clean Harbors are assessing and have not come to any significant conclusions, but I will say that candidly that the impacts look pretty limited. Future assessment and remediation activities at this site are planned to be ongoing under the record corrective action, where you will still retain the right to have public access and involvement. And that concludes my presentation. We are now into the Q&A period of this public meeting. And as we mentioned, we invite people to come up, ask their questions. Please try to be succinct in your questions and limit yourself to one question at a time. You're more than welcome to get up more than once.
I'll be here.
For sure.
Okay, I got a few comments first of all. First of all, your data is based on an average. All that data you gave us, the data you got from the regulators is an average. The next thing is your berm.
But so are the, and so are the criteria. In other words, the PM 2.5, the PM 10 criteria, those criteria are based on averages, so it's appropriate that the data be average.
That's exactly right. And what we've been telling people for the last 50 years is this community isn't an average community. And
Point taken.
now one of the things in your formula there that you measured was air currents and how it affects the disposition, how it moves the chemicals and all. We've been telling people also that we're impacted by coastal zone inversion. You know what that is, right?
I do.
Okay. Anyway, that's what we got there. As a matter of fact, Clean Harbors lost their wheel, their hazardous waste incinerator for that reason. That's one of the reasons they lost it.
Let me stop you right there. First of all, that's more than one question. On the coastal zone inversion question, I would say that there was probably no coastal zone inversion the night of the fire. We saw the plume. The plume was headed straight up. I doubt very much. It was a cold winter night. I do not believe that there was an inversion that night. But I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's the same as the California Valley effect, and I think you'd have a hard argument with those people out there. Anyway, that's not my question. That's just general talk. Anyway, I have a question. A PHMSA document noted that there is a difference between designating an event either an incident or an accident. It appears that there is a significant difference in how the regulators deal with these events. Clean Harbors uses the term incident in their documentation. I was hoping that the DEP would be here. The definition for incident and accidents cannot be found in any DEP site. What are the implications of both designations? Now, my understanding is by saying you're an incident instead of an accident gives you a lower level of regulator enforcement. That's the way I'm reading it from what I've read.
I can't comment on that, but
Oh,
I will
good.
ask you to have a seat and let others come up and talk.
Oh, I will, but you
We'll
will,
take that under consideration.
Now-
I really don't know of I mean, I'm sure many different regulations define incident and accident in very different ways. So, but we'll take
so
that under
you're
advisement.
gonna get back to us on this answer, right? You're gonna tell
Yes,
us what the difference is?
absolutely, yes.
And why is it every Clean Harbors document uses incident rather than accident? Does that mean that when they come up with the number of accidents that you've had, this one isn't counted because it's an incident, not an accident?
So typically, I don't know that we necessarily make a differentiation, but we'll look into it, but we're not aware of any difference between using the word.
Yeah, I've done this for a lot of years, and I didn't realize it either until I
I
read
would
that.
say that the differentiation in the report was unintentional. That we had no intention of defining it as an incident versus an accident.
But in every document that has incident rather than accident. And if the normal person, like any one of these people, would tell you had an accident down there.
Thank you.
I get lots of questions. I'll get back at the end of the meeting.
That's fine.
Yeah, okay. I was wondering, what was the actual materials, the chemicals that burned that night?
That's a very hard question to answer.
Did
It's
they
an
have records of
extremely
what was
long
stored?
list. The list is in the report.
Okay.
If you can't discern it from the report, let us know. But there's an appendix in the report that lists all the chemicals that were there in the fire.
Is that report the RTN 429702?
The IRAC, yes, the IRA completion report, that's correct, submitted, as we mentioned, on April 17th.
There's a slide earlier up that had, there's a website and it said RTN 4-29702. Is that the document that's at the Tufts Library that you mentioned earlier?
It is at the Tufts Library. It's very difficult to read it in print. If you have access to computers, I would highly recommend that you do that.
Is it that? I don't know if you can read that. Sorry, I can.
You mean the web address?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that. Okay.
I can't see it because I don't have my glasses on, but
Sorry about that. I can
That's
ask
all right.
afterwards.
yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
Okay. That was
We'll make sure whatever, by whatever means you need to access that
That
information.
information is there.
Yes.
Do you know roughly what was there? I'm just curious right now.
Just many solvents,
Yeah.
some fuels,
Okay.
okay? A tiny bit of PCBs
All right,
was
yeah.
contained there. Probably some caustics and those types of waste, but a pretty wide variety of wastes were contained there. Some chlorinated solvents,
Yeah.
but many more traditional aromatic type solvents like toluene,
All right.
acetone, things like that. There was apparently a fair amount of acetone. It would seem that acetone was disproportionately high, but that's largely because acetone is water soluble more so than all the other solvents. That's why the proportion looks so much higher.
All right, great. I'll
Sure.
get back in line and ask my next question.
Is there no one else that has any questions?
Let them go.
Okay, so I did get that you tested for dioxins and also for, the dioxins and furans in
Yes.
the soil in the area?
Yes.
Okay, is that information available, the concentrations and what you found?
Yes, it's in the report,
In the same
in the
report?
soil data tables.
Okay.
I can tell you that the reason we tested for dioxin-furans was not because they were actually a waste, but because they tend to be a product of incomplete combustion of the chlorinated solvents.
Okay, do they actually test for particular dioxins or particular species of furans or other chlorinated compounds?
Particulate?
No, specific.
Yes, we tested for a large range of what we call the dioxin-furan compounds. It's a list of about 10 compounds. And yes, and then we right, tested for those.
So the report will show the individual compounds.
It
In
will,
different
I mean,
concentrations.
it will, yes, the lab reports in the appendix of the report will actually list all the individual compounds and their concentrations, yes.
Okay, yeah. Did you test the soil in the neighborhoods around?
We did not.
For dioxins, and
No.
are you thinking of doing that?
We are not,
Okay.
and that's because we modeled it, concentrations are less than 1,000 times low, below the standard, and we don't believe that it would be fruitful to model to test the soil in the neighborhoods.
I was wondering, how much would that cost to test? Just to relieve the minds of the people, because some
Sure.
kids don't know here what they are.
The samples cost between $700 and $800 a sample,
Each one?
each one, yes, it's very expensive.
Okay. All right, I'll move on.
You're welcome.
So there was a discussion about the, I guess this is what I'm, have to do, so I'll just do it.
You can raise the microphone a little bit, you're tall.
The
That's fine.
milky white precipitate that is discussed in the report. So I had a question at the earlier mayor's meeting about what exact time was the Clean Harbors stormwater treatment system turned off?
My understanding is that it was shut off before firefighting water could even reach the inlets.
What exact time?
Within 10 or 15 minutes of the fire.
So before 10 o'clock? Because the fire started before 10.
I don't know if it was before 10 o'clock.
So does the treatment system, it's the same question, does the treatment system have any type of log, any type of electronic flow meter where you can determine, bingo, the flow meter shows that there's zero flow?
Yeah, it does not.
It does not have a continuous flow meter?
It does not. We take a grab sample from that, is where we do our analysis before we discharge, but we do not have a log meter that would give us a time when that was exactly shut off. What we do know is that personnel was on site and immediately put that system off within 10 minutes before the water could even get to that area.
Because, okay. No, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Nita Licka. I have a question for Mr. Foley, I believe.
Yes, ma'am.
The trailers that were parked outside not outside the facility, but in the back of the facility, I thought in the beginning you told us there were 5 trailers, and I just found out that there were 9.
So we refer to that area, there was 9 trailers stored there, but
Could
only.
you speak up? I'm old, and
Yes.
I'm hard of hearing.
So we refer to the area with 9 trailers that were in the area, but there
Yeah,
were
there
only
was
4 van trailers that were actually affected by the fire.
And how far apart were those trailers?
Roughly 3 feet,
3 feet each?
yes. So there was superficial damage to the other trailers, but the
Yeah.
material inside the trailers were.
So that was probably a violation of some sort? What,
So we're required by permit, we have the ability to store 24 van trailers in designated slots in the facility, and we had the trailers in those proper locations.
what was the consequence for Clean Harbors for having those trailers packed so close together that they could catch fire?
Well, the consequence is that we're not running our operation anymore.
Were
until we get
you fined?
Not at this point.
No.
So again, we were operating within the conditions of our permit. And I tell you that in learning as you go and doing things better, I believe our submittal is to DEP right now, has distance between these trailers for future activity if we're able to get our facility permit back.
I'm going to take the liberty because I am an old lady. I'd like to know how often are you monitored by the hazardous waste person from Braintree Fire Department?
Well, the fire department is fairly frequent. DEP is required to inspect this on an annual basis, once a year.
Just once a year?
Yes. I
That
believe,
should change.
Yeah, the DEP walked us through that in previous meetings, and, you know, there's certainly a significant workload on DEP across the state, because it's not just TSDFs like we're running here, but it's also all the generators that they're required to inspect. And so I believe Greg Cooper from DEP indicated that there was over 100 different facilities that they have to inspect on an annual basis.
But none, is none like Clean Harbors. Thank you.
You mentioned this, what's the cloudy white material? You mentioned that you looked to see where it came from. Did they test what region?
No, unfortunately, we were unable to collect a sample of that material.
Oh, okay, thanks. Cloudy white material, what I was talking about.
Hi, I'm Alice Arena. I'm a resident of Weymouth, not Braintree. And I would like to make a couple of comments. And the first comment is that I think that everyone in the room has an understanding that a company like Clean Harbors has to exist. Because we are producing all of these horrible chemicals, somebody has to take care of them. So until we stop doing those things, we understand that. But one of the things that caught my eye was that what happened on February 16th was caused by the same kind of mismanagement for which Clean Harbors was fined in 2007. And that included, according to the Justice Department, inadequate waste characterization and improper storage of incompatible wastes. And I know that, I think what has been said was that the client who shipped that stuff in there either didn't give you the correct information or didn't have the information on the manifests. In a meeting with Acting Director Gary DeMarian from the DEP, he said that they thought that it was the cobalt carbonyl that caused the fire. And I have a list of questions about how you handle the manifests because the information that I'm hearing is nonsense. That the you didn't know what was in the containers, and so therefore you couldn't tell the fire department this, and this is coming from the Braintree meetings, and that makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. But one question that I have for you is that in consideration of the fact that the majority of the smoke went to Weymouth, in the Idlewell neighborhood and in North Weymouth, and we know that from the purple air monitors that my group maintains and also from the state's monitor. Have you had any interactions with the town of Weymouth in regards to the smoke and things that went over there?
I think only through our air consultant, GEP, basically took that information and put it into their models. And so we relied on the air experts. We have internal air experts within Clean Harbors, but we chose to use third-party vendors,
Yep.
like Tom and his team and the air monitoring company, GDB.
Yeah, I will say that I personally did go out into the neighborhoods. Unfortunately, I'm not that familiar with Weymouth, or at the time where Idlewell was, but I did go to North Weymouth, and I did speak with residents in that area of North Weymouth who said they had not been impacted, but I stand corrected if people could show me evidence.
There were complaints that I heard from the Idlewell neighborhood that people had like soot on their houses and things like that. Someone had just repaved their walkway and had black stuff all over it. So it would have been kind of inconceivable if nothing had fallen on this area, considering the amount of smoke, the particulate matter measurements that were on our monitors and the state's monitor. It would have been kind of odd if nothing happened. I mean, it's a fire, right? You get ash from any fire, correct? And then you mentioned that you were looking at a comprehensive air quality monitoring system. Can you tell us anything more about that?
I don't think we all know exactly what we're looking to put in and install. We're just agreeing to be part of that. I think there's a lot of ways to look at it and what you're ultimately trying to accomplish. And there's many ways to do it. There's fence line monitoring. There's monitoring we can put in neighborhoods rather. And so I think it's between us and the technical folks in the town to make the best decision on where we'd like to locate these air monitors.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Torres from Weymouth also. Well, she asked the question, Alice asked the question that I was going to ask, what was the cause of it? And she did say it was known to be 2 different elements that were combustible and ignited it. But I was just, going to say about the fines. I'm not really for the fines, I'm really for the prevention. Although fines could be, motivation to not have a fire, but I'm more concerned about the prevention. And also, what I was saying at the meeting last week was that a lot of people didn't even know there was a fire. And could you have like a system where it would go out to the telephones? And the man that was there at the meeting in Braintree said that it was very possible to have an alert go to every phone within, say, a half a mile, which I would suggest because you didn't know at the time whether it was dangerous chemicals, so it would be good for people to stay in and shut their windows until it's over. So that would be it. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback.
You had mentioned that the fire burned very hot. You had mentioned melted aluminum and deformed steel. But I was wondering how you can be sure that the fire burned uniformly hot. There might have been parts that were very hot, parts that weren't very hot, and also the firemen were spraying water on it to keep it from being hot. So how uniform do you know, do you think that the fire was?
Yes, what I'll say, it's, you're absolutely correct. We have, I have been involved in assessing hazardous waste incinerators and things like that. We have certain requirements for uniformity, time, temperature, detention, and yes, you're right. This fire, or fires in general, because you're applying water to them, you are going to get products of incomplete combustion. However, when you apply water to the fire and you get these products, the idea is it knocks the soot down and it stays at the original source.
Some will get knocked down.
So yes, that's why we looked for dioxide furans. We're not going to say, oh, there's no products of incomplete combustion. That's why we did what we did. We looked for these products and we did the model. So regardless of the efficiency of the fire, I'm still very confident in the numbers that we've generated.
Okay, how can you gauge the efficiency of a fire like this? In an incinerator, I can understand that's controlled all the way through. But a fire like this is just so random and unknown, and the fireman is spraying water on it.
It's you can't gauge it, but you can look at the fire, at the flames, and you can kind of get a sense of how hot this is burning. And it was burning hot. The fact that it's burning very hot, it's probably, and again, I don't have stats on this, but it was probably more efficient than your typical house fire, which would have all sorts of vinyl siding and PVC piping, which is really some pretty bad stuff.
But this fire was burning hot in the hottest part, but there would have been other parts that weren't burning as hot. And I was wondering how you figure out the percentages that are burning hot versus the percentages that aren't.
Yes, that was the job of Mr. Hamlin, who did the modeling, yes.
I just don't see how you can really gauge that. I'd be curious to see the dioxin information, because that seems to be the best.
Well, it's in the report.
Yeah, all right, thanks.
You're welcome.
Hello, Elizabeth Maglio, Town Councilor from Braintree. So a couple things, just to underscore. On August 2011, August 15th, 2011, the Department of Justice finding is that Clean Harbors of Braintree has agreed to pay a significant penalty and perform additional projects to settle a complaint filed by the U.S. Department of Justice on behalf of the Environmental Protection Agency. It is expected that Clean Harbors will pay $650,000 penalty and will spend $1 million on a supplemental environmental project. Clean Harbors will comply with an enhanced waste analysis plan that goes beyond what is currently required in its hazardous waste permit. At a site inspection of Braintree Clean Harbors facility, the violations included inadequate waste characterization, the failure to properly maintain its hazardous waste tanks, inadequate secondary containment, and improper storage of incompatible wastes. So that finding was 2011.
Is there a question here, Ms. Bagley?
It's getting there. You didn't limit the amount of time to ask the question, so
Certainly.
I'm going to continue.
Okay.
In 2017, PIMSA, Clean Harbors Environmental Services, Inc. of Norwell, fined $28,000, offered a hazardous material for transportation and commerce, which was released into the environment, offered hazardous materials for transportation and commerce in flexible bulk containers, which were stacked, offered hazardous materials for transportation in commerce, which were improperly segregated, offered hazardous materials for transportation in commerce while improperly placarding a vehicle containing hazardous material. So we now have, in just recent history, the same incidents happening over and over with the same kinds of violations. The placards. In this particular fire, the firefighters didn't know what was in there because the placards melted. And yet you were cited in 2017 for improper placards, improper transportation, improper commerce, improper labeling. This is all very familiar. So the question is, if you didn't learn at 2011, and you didn't learn it in 2017, what's to say that now in this 2023, where you say we want to learn to do better, that we can really feel assured about that, given your own history of violations?
I'll take a swing at it, if it's okay. So, Ms. Maglio, Council.
Your mic is not on.
I'll tell you this, is we handle over 300,000 drum containers a month in our company. It's not an exact science. We get 99.9% right. Is there a chance that something goes wrong relative to a DOT inspection, Department of Transportation? Yes, there is. We are relying on our systems, but also our knowledgeable staff. So we have I get we need to be 100%. There's no question about that.
Then that's where you should stop, is to say, we need to get it 100% right. You need to say you are sorry. You need to open up all forms of transparency in order for us to understand and to believe that that's what's going to happen this time.
Well, I could sit here and say it, and like Becky said before, we let our actions do the talking here. We appreciate the question. I would just tell you that we're getting the vast majority of this correct. We are relying on generator information to properly characterize our waste per the EPA regulations. That is some of those findings we're talking about in 2011. Generators are required by law to properly characterize their material. There's only so much we can do about that. We are relying on these generators to properly characterize it. I would tell you, I've been in this company for 33 years. I was involved with the Braintree plant back in 2011. I can tell you unequivocally, we've made huge strides down here. We've replaced every single tank in the tank farm. We've replaced all the secondary containment. We've retrained our staff. We've committed more to that. We weren't perfect.
Yep.
We'll sit here
So I appreciate that you have done the things that you need to do in order to continue running your business. But that's what those things are. In order for you to generate the kinds of profits you generate, you need to do certain reinvestments in your business. That's not something that necessarily, that doesn't erase when things are unsafe and when people are at risk. So that's something that I'd like to leave you with that thought. And I'll be back up.
One quick question. You mentioned the company mislabeled materials sent to Clean Harbors. Did I hear you right? That was And then I want to continue my questions.
Misrepresented.
Okay.
Was there a fine assessed to that company? Because if there isn't any punitive action to the companies that are, or organizations sending you materials, then they can continue to send you mislabeled materials. So maybe you could tell me what kind of punitive action was done to the company sending you stuff that was not labeled properly? That's my question.
So that's continuing to be under investigation. We can't speak specifically to if that company was fined at this point, but I do know that they are under investigation.
Okay, because we don't want that happening, you know, with another company, the same well, not the same because they're fired, but other companies, if they're not punished, they could continue just shipping stuff that's mislabeled to you.
Who are they under investigation from?
Well, DEP would be the regulating body. And then it's between Clean Harbors and the company as well, from a legal perspective.
Thank you.
Hi, Jerry Grenier, I'm from Idlewild. I stood there the night of the fire. I live on the other side of the river in the Idlewild neighborhood. And I watched that fire all night. The plume I have pictures I could share with you. The plume didn't go up in the air. It lingered in the basin most of the night. And I'll be glad to send you pictures if you want. So I just want to clarify that the plume didn't just disappear into the air. Thank you.
Margaret Belfiore, Weymouth. I'm concerned with the discharge that went into the Fore River. I know you said it's an unknown milky precipitate, but I'm concerned with the river and your location so close to the river. So I've been very interested in the waterways regulation, and I have some questions for Mr. Foley. The waterways, chapter 91, is actually a colonial regulation from 1641, which is 100 years before our dear Abigail Adams was born here in Weymouth. So it goes back a long way because of the fragility of the coast, because of the importance of protecting the water. So my question for you is, do you have a waterways permit? If so, when did you get it? If you do have one, how did you meet the requirement that Clean Harbors has to be water dependent? Because I don't think a row of trailers loaded with hazardous waste is water dependent. And did you file an environmental impact statement which was required as well?
So we have a stormwater discharge permit at the Braintree facility that requires us to collect any stormwater that falls on the property and run it through a wastewater treatment system, which consists of carbon filtration, ion exchange, which can pull out low levels of metals, and ultimately discharge into the Fore River. Part of that process is that we have to meet a discharge parameter that is preset. And every time we discharge, we are required by permit to pull a sample, analyze that, and report any different deficiencies against our discharge parameter. We do not have any discharge deficiencies whatsoever because we have a very robust system. So we have no exceedances of our discharge parameters. That is our storm discharge permit. I'm not sure about this colonial permit that you speak of.
Well, it's chapter 91. Anyone here from DEP can explain the waterways permit. You do not have a waterways permit?
Not to my knowledge.
I think you should have one.
John Harris up there? Did I see it?
What's the question? Do you guys have a chapter 91 permit? How do you guys tell us? Do you have one or not?
I don't believe unless that technical term is tied to the
I
storm.
don't know the answer to that question. We can find out for you.
I would venture that you probably don't know whether you have one or not.
That's fair.
These are, as you mentioned, these permits date back to the 1800s. And
Well, I
They-
only gave you that for some historical
no,
tidbit.
but they do date back that far. And one thing that I will say about this property is that you are not on the river. Okay, the property does not.
You showed that, and the
Yeah,
river
no,
was
what I
right
mean
there.
is that the property does not actually have frontage on the river. There's a buffer around the Clean Harbors property, to my knowledge. And so it's possible, I really don't know whether they have. Yeah. we'll
I
have to
would
get
like
back
to know whether you have the chapter 91, it's very important
And we
regulation.
can't answer that question right now. Thank you.
Okay, so that's a good one to keep in mind in terms of the Chapter 91 permit.
Yeah.
A second question that I'd love to hear from DEP to talk about the investigation that's happening with the generator that mislabeled the materials that we just heard about.
Hey, John.
DEP?
Apologies. I'm sorry.
We heard that there is an investigation currently taking place regarding the generator who mislabeled the materials that caught on fire. And we'd like to hear an update on that investigation.
Sure, it's, that would be taken care of out of our Northeast Regional Office, so we're out of the Southeast Region. So the facility where this material came out of the North Shore. So that office is taking care of it, and I wouldn't be able to.
It's also deliberative, Councilwoman, so we can't comment on that. If it's an ongoing investigation, it's deliberative, and we cannot comment on it.
So what can you say in terms of in general, the length of time?
I can't even comment on whether or not there is an investigation going on. The Clean Harbors folks said that, we do not.
Again, I believe we said,
I have a letter
if there
from
is an
the
investigation, it
office
would be on behalf of DEP.
I have a letter set. Okay, well, that's fine, but we're not gonna comment on it. It's in different regions, it's deliberative. The answer's still the same.
We get that it's deliberative. We got that. Thank you.
So since a lot of people are focused on the Strem chemicals, I did file a records request, and they would help, the Northeast office would help 4 documents, only 4, I guess, that they could find that were related to this enforcement process that's going on. But going back to the waste approval question that someone else had, does your waste approval process request safety data sheets from the customers?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The safety data sheet from Strem Chemicals for cobalt carbonyl, dicobalt octocarbonyl, says that you should handle it under inert gas. You should store contents under inert gas. You should store in a well-ventilated place and keep cool. Were you doing any of those things with the material?
Yeah, so the profile that was submitted to us had extremely low levels of cobalt carbonyl, which wouldn't warrant those storage requirements.
So the approval that you had for cobalt carbonyl was at a very low concentration?
That's what the profile indicated.
The material that did catch fire spontaneously, what was that?
Cobalt carbonyl.
Okay, so there was a high enough concentration for that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
I would like to know if Clean Harbors has an evacuation plan for the residents of Braintree, Weymouth, Quincy.
So, we have an evacuation plan for the facility. We rely on the evacuation plan from the town with the fire department. And so that's what we mentioned earlier, is one of the things that was assessed was, while there is an evacuation plan for the town, the town would like to improve that overall evacuation plan. And so we're going to participate as an active active member in the community and in that area to help and bring some resources that we have to help advance that.
So the answer is yes, you do have an evacuation plan, or you're making one now?
No, so we, as a part of we have what we call a contingency plan, which is a part of the permit. And as a part of your permit, you're required to have.
Because I'd like to tell you, back in the 70s and 80s, as far as we were told, the evacuation plan was the first dead body, everything would stop. So I'm hoping that you've improved on it.
So if soot, people talked a lot about the soot and how the soot, is seen in various places all around the basin. But if soot was actually captured from a roof about a half mile away from the fire, would that analysis of that impact the plume modeling or factor into the plume modeling that you've done so far?
I'm not sure how that data would be incorporated into the plume model.
Should it be obtained in order to determine how accurate the plume modeling is?
I can't answer that question. I'd have to discuss that with GHD to see whether they can use that data. There's a number of questions that get raised, Brian. One is, of course, how the sample was collected. The other is, what's the temporal signature of that sample. Obviously, we know there was a fire that night, but we don't know.
Would it be important to determine if it has the cobalt in it?
It could be of importance.
Okay. How does, this is, again, going into the air modeling, I guess. The dioxin found outside the berm that was left in place. It'd be nice if you had that matrix slide up still, but that didn't meet the soil and groundwater standards. It met the imminent hazard. You had a blank.
That's correct.
And in your report, I believe you say it doesn't meet it, but it's going to be part of the continuing RCRA action.
That is correct. There will also be some other actions taken by Clean Harbors. I think I forgot to mention that there will be, Clean Harbors has plans to install a better system for containment of the water on their site. I don't know if I'm authorized to mention that.
That's fine. So we're looking at, there's a concrete berm down by the stormwater system that we're just going to extend further up to ensure that earthen berm system doesn't fail.
Right.
But how does the concentration pre-excavation, right, pre-factory, how does that concentration estimate tie in with the dioxin concentration calculation as part of the total particulate mass? You take the fraction, multiply it by the total particulate mass, and you get a concentration. How does that concentration match up with actual results from the fire as analyzed in the berm?
Okay, keep in mind that my recollection, admittedly I did this 2 months ago, my recollection is that we used the concentration from the immediate vicinity of the fire, not way out on the berms, because those concentrations were much lower. So we used the worst case concentrations that we found, which were right there under the asphalt, and that's
But that was to form an assumption that you then applied across all of eastern Massachusetts. So how does that assumption match up with an actual result as discovered outside the berm?
It doesn't. It's not.
Does it match the same fraction analysis?
I don't know the answer to that, but I would guess that it may or may not match the same fraction. Keep in mind that you know, the berm, the.
We're outside the berm now.
What's that?
We're outside the berm.
Right, well, outside and inside, keep in mind that there are two sets of berms. And it was the second set of berm where this outside the berm, as you call it, was found. And in fact, that is still, for the most part, on Clean Harbors property. So, yes, it is. So, it's difficult for me to answer this question because I don't have the data in front of me, and I honestly, I was looking for the worst case situation, which I figured would be closest to the fire.
I'm looking for someone else in behind me in line.
You can ask another question.
Thank you. Could you cycle back through the, to where, it's near the beginning. Keep going, I think two more, one more. Okay, environmental releases evaluated. Firefighting water discharge to the city Sicko property retention pond through a berm system breach. So you took back 30,000 gallons of water from Sicko. Sicko claims that based on their flow meter, they measured flow from that area where their retention pond is. They measured flow from that property area from somewhere between 1 and 2 a.m. until 8 a.m. the next morning when they discovered the berm breach and discovered that the system was pumping. They measured that off of that flow meter analysis, which you guys don't even have a flow meter, so, you know, I guess they're much more advanced than you guys, so. From that flow meter, they measured 7,500 gallons that was discharged into the river. From that Sicko property retention pond, which you're saying it was an environmental release that you took ownership of through this evaluation process. Plus, you took the 30,000 gallons back of what was remaining there after the 7,500 gallons flowed through the stormwater treatment system.
Is there a question?
The question is, are you going to analyze the sediment of the Sicko outfall for cobalt, dioxins, and other things that you measured, probably acetone, in the sediment, which would have been deposited because it wouldn't have been treated in the Sicko stormwater treatment system?
One thing I'll say is that a statement was made at the last meeting that the Sicko treatment system would not have treated this material, and that is incorrect. So the Sicko system has an oil water separator, and it also has a vortex separator, which means that particulate would have, let me finish, which means that the particulate would have been treated by the vortex separator.
Isn't that controlled by specific gravity? We agreed ahead of time that I could ask questions if you could.
I know, but you can't interrupt me while I'm answering.
I'm just interjecting.
So I just wanted to say that the system would have treated something like dioxin-furan, because one of the things that we do know, or at least we believe firmly, is that the dioxin-furan is most closely associated with the particulate portion of the soot. And one of the ways that we did our cleanup around
So is the soot a settleable solid or a suspended solid? And what micron size is the soot? And what micron size would that vortex separator take the material out?
I don't have it.
And did you analyze the sediment in the vortex separator for dioxins and furans and everything else?
You are asking a lot of questions, Brian.
Well, we're talking about the performance. You just said, you made a statement that said the system would have removed the
I said it would have treated it. I didn't say what the efficiency of the system in removing it is.
I don't think you, Tom, I'm sorry, but I don't think you're qualified with the appropriate industrial engineering wastewater design expertise.
I'm sorry, you're absolutely wrong. I have a book to my name on metals treatment, and I've been doing this work for many, many
Are
years.
you a professional engineer
I am.
for wastewater systems?
I have done wastewater system design, yes.
For the removal of some particulates that contain dioxins?
No, not specifically.
Is there someone that could look at that and come back with a more definitive removal efficiency?
Well, anyone could look at the design of the vortex separator and give you a better answer than I'm giving you off the cuff right now. So why don't we table that question and see what we come up with?
We'll go back to the original question. You tried to say that it had treatment efficiency, so therefore the sediment wouldn't have to be sampled. But I think there's an easy way to settle this all. And you sample the sediment, and if there's nothing there, then it had 100% removal efficiency. That's a good way to settle.
I will say that we have started by sampling the sediment in the Sitco pond, and that's where we'll start this process.
And just to clarify, we have not, at least we have not, seen the data yet from Sitco of some of these claims that they've made. So we cannot speak on that yet. We are still in discussions with Sitco. And again, out of an abundance of caution, we've collected a significant amount of water from Sitco, just to make sure.
Hey, Mike Calvin, I'm a Braintree resident. My question is, does the community support plan that you guys had a slide up there before, does it have a timetable for when the comprehensive air quality management plan will be put into place, and who's making sure that happens, and when does that need to happen? And I have a similar question on the training, the hazmat training for the fire department. Is that not just a one-time thing, but a ongoing thing?
So related to the air monitoring, as you can imagine, complicated issue. It's also a more holistic issue that has to be addressed, not just by Clean Harbors, but by the town, in conjunction with the town and with the basin, making sure we take into account, the concerns of the citizens. We have started discussions. We're in discussions. I can't speak to the timeline of that, but we are committed until we come up with a solution, a specific solution on what needs to happen.
If you had to guess, is it a year, 2 years?
No, I don't think so.
Less than that?
I don't think so. I think less than that.
And what about the training for the fire? Is that an ongoing thing? Annual training on the hazmat for them?
Yeah, so that would be a 24-hour ASWAP training that we'll do on fairly short order. We'll just have to coordinate with folks to get as many people through that, and then it would be a 8-hour self-refresher.
Annually or annually?
So the discussions that you've been having regarding the evacuation planning and other kinds of things, who are those discussions with?
So that's with the mayor and his staff. Yeah.
The mayor and his staff. So has anyone actually reached out to Twin Rivers,
I can't speak to that.
Enbridge, any of the other? So actually then, probably none of that is really moving forward beyond a discussion at Braintree Town Hall.
No, so we're waiting to hear back when they want to have those discussions with the broader community. We've offered and we've said we're ready when you're ready.
So, I remember being at your place for a tour. That was right after it, and you mentioned that. I remember you coming the first time to the town council, and you made that offer. You came the second time to the council, you made that offer. Last week at East Middle School, you made that offer. Okay, so we're up to 5. Can you just start making those calls? Well, I don't understand why there wouldn't be that you wouldn't find it to be imperative to just move ahead and start reaching out to the other industries there.
So we have started to reach out to other industries to talk about what can we do in the broader community together, but that's just started. So and again, I would say the evacuation planning The town said that they specifically want to lead that, and Margaret, Chief of Staff, Forest, my understanding is she's working in conjunction with the fire department to lead that effort. So we're participating, we're not leading that particular effort, because they said they wanted to lead that effort.
Okay, so that hasn't started either, so for the record, we have the local emergency planning LEPC committee, which has been working on an evaluation plan now for all these years. I'm not sure why, even after a fire and an incident happens, that hasn't moved forward. So let's just note for the record that no one has really moved that forward, because talking about it isn't really a plan to move it forward. Second, is there a meeting set up with the other industries?
So I want to go back to first, I just want to correct the record.
Sure.
So we've talked with Mass Maritime, we've had discussions with them, and we have reached out to the town and said, we have discussed with them, we're waiting on a date, and so we're waiting on a date for them so we can then link up and actually start those discussions. So it is progressing. Again, we can only control what we can control, and so we've taken the action and we're waiting now to get response from the town.
And I think to get the response from the town, I think that's a key piece of this, because there are multiple dimensions to how something like this moves forward. And if everybody waits, then nothing actually happens. So is there a meeting set up with any of the other industries?
So we've had individual phone calls with some of the other groups, not specifically on this topic yet, but we have reached out.
Is there a Zoom on this topic with the other industries? So until those really concrete things happen, it doesn't feel, now it's June, it's June, it doesn't feel like anything's moving forward. I said in February, I said in March, I said in April, and I'm saying in June, that I will help with those things. I know that our relationship is very adversarial, but I'm also a pretty hard worker, and I also run circles around most of the people that are saying, we'll do that, we'll set it up, it'll happen, because here we are, it's June, nothing has happened that impacts the community. Nothing, zero, zilch. I'm not saying you're not doing anything, I'm saying that there's nothing that impacts anything on the resident-facing side. So, I will make the offer again. If you would like me to help in my role as a resident, in my role as a counselor, in my role as someone who's just fairly bold and not afraid of power structures, I will do that outreach and I will help get that going. Because my intention here is not to continue coming to meetings to yell at people. My intention is to just move this along. We all want to go back with our lives, right? You do, we do. So let's get it done. Okay.
I can't get into that document that you had listed up there. Can I talk to you afterwards about getting access to that?
Sure. Did you go in through the EAEO website?
Yep, I got there, I typed in the RTN, but it says it's not even right.
Oh, yeah, okay, so here, I can just do that for you.
All right.
You have to put the zeros.
Yeah.
See how it has a certain number of
Zeros on the
digits?
end, it doesn't work.
All right, no, they have to be
Oh,
in front.
oh, okay, that's why.
Right, so.
Oh,
Uh,
I think just two O's,
Two O's, yes.
and it should not be a space.
Yeah, I know, how do I get rid of space?
I'll
You can do that. But I think once you do that, you'll find that it loads for you.
So do we need to just change something on the screen?
Yeah, it should say 0029. 702. Let's see if that works. Search. Now, this is the, so I get that. That's what I'm supposed to see?
That's correct. And then you click on that RTN, and then it will, on a computer screen, it'll
Yeah,
be
it
much
would look a lot
easier
better, but I
to.
wanted to just make sure that I get to it. Now,
Sure.
this says all the cobalt, carbonyl, and dioxin in the furan data. This is that document?
I don't know about the cobalt carbonyl, but it will have the data, it will have the information on the content of the waste streams. Yes. Yes.
Okay, so the dioxin and the furan stuff is.
And the dioxin and the furan data will be in the appendix on the soil and groundwater, or rather soil and surface water data that was collected, yes.
If the cobalt carbonyl data was in here, how do I get that?
You know, you can call me.
Okay.
Yeah, you can call me. My name is on the letter that you would have received. Are you?
I didn't
part
get the
of
letter,
it?
I'm just a guy that walking out the
Okay,
street.
well, you can reach out to Brian.
Is this you?
What's this? It is.
Okay, I got your email address.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, thank you.
All right, so you can email me or phone me, whatever you'd like.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's not easy to go to the Southfield.
Suzanne Brothers, Braintree resident. Just want to follow up on some comments that Councilor Magna just made a few minutes ago. I've sat with her in some of those LEPC meetings along with some other folks in this room. In fact, probably going back 2 years. If my memory serves me correct, I believe there was a Clean Harbors representative in at least one of those meetings. Granted, the conversations were more focused around evacuation planning related to the compressor station. Those meetings are quiet affairs. People don't have much to say. They say we're ready. We're ready for emergencies. We can handle it. And none of us want to say we told you so. But when this emergency happened, when this incident, accident, however we want to characterize it, it's clear we weren't ready. So we're not just talking about a few months since this event happened. We're talking about years and even decades. Folks, a lot of folks in this room have been raising alarms about the Fore River Basin for decades. And we've seen very little movement. A lot of us are concerned. We're talking about vulnerable populations. This is an environmental justice community. If you look on the environmental justice maps, we see a lot of poverty, a lot of minority populations. They're vulnerable. There's no room for error. In addition, we're talking about a heavy industrial region. Again, there's no room for error. You say, we do the best that we can. Sorry, it has to be perfect. Because if there's a bad accident, there's a lot that could happen. So, it's just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
I have a follow-up question. I don't think the question I had was actually answered, so maybe you can do that. I asked about the timetable of the community support plan. Who actually makes sure that that happens? Is it because it was part of the report submitted to the DEP? Did they make sure it happens? Or is it the town of Braintree that's supposed to make sure that this happens? A year from now, that this thing doesn't just disappear?
Sorry, I didn't catch what you said, the timetable?
Timetable.
Oh, sorry, timetable, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I can hear you. The timetable for the,
Community support plan.
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, getting a timetable
Okay.
and also
The
making sure that
Oh,
the timetable happens and, who's gonna ask you all if it's not anyone in this room?
right.
Is the DEP, is it the town of Braintree that's expected to do that? Who's really gonna make sure that it happens?
So if it was, if some of the items were permit related, obviously the DEP follows up and we get inspected by the DEP. For some of these other things that we talked about that we've committed to, whether we have agreement, or I don't know whether we have agreement or not, but so things like we've committed to a household hazardous waste day, we've committed to those things, we're doing those things.
Air quality monitoring.
Air quality monitoring,
Yeah.
so we committed to that. We're gonna do it. Now we have to just make sure that we pick the right solution that is in conjunction with and comprehensive enough to address the concerns, right, of the town. So we're gonna keep asking about it. We're gonna keep, pushing that forward, just like the evacuation plan. So while I appreciate, I think Liz, your comments were good, we continue to ask about it. We're not just sitting here saying, well, we're just gonna wait for an answer. We ask, and we'll continue to ask and follow up until it gets done.
But if in a year from now, some of those things don't happen, who's gonna ask you about it? Is it the town of Braintree, is the DEP?
I hope for those things that are above the permit, it's gonna be the town of Braintree.
Okay.
And again, you know, I think one of the things we committed to this group in multiple town halls, is that we're gonna keep continuing to show up and participate and be a part of this community going forward.
One quick follow-up. Does the report, and does it, when it says the comprehensive, community support plan, does it specify what's covered by the DEP permit, operating permit, what's not? And so what's extra, so therefore what the town of Braintree should be on the lookout for?
So we didn't put it here, but we can obviously get back to you and separate that out if you want to see it separated out.
All right.
We didn't separate it out.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Keegan was just so kind enough to let me step in on that, and I'm grateful. I don't know that the question's for you. It's more of a comment and then perhaps a question. Councilor Maglio had asked about it, and I think you did a really nice job answering it. We're in the process, right, where you're pushing, you're waiting, and my question is for everybody in the room. I'm new to this, right? I've not done a lot of this. I was here the other day. I was here with the mayor. I'm going to be here on Wednesday. And this group of people who's here has been doing this for a long time, and they have a lot of information I don't even understand. Like, there's no doubt about it. They understand it at a different level than I could. But what I do understand is what the residents are asking for, not just from you, but again, from everyone that's in this Fore River Basin areas. What is it gonna take to get everybody in the room? Like, there's a lot more residents than what's in this room that would care about this if they knew about it, if they truly understood it. It's at a time that's convenient. It's not far away for a lot of people, and yet we are still dealing with an environmental justice thing. How do we get everybody in the room? The mayor of Quincy, the mayor of Braintree, the mayor of Weymouth, to be here with all the industries in the Fore River Basin. Like, how can you help to, I don't know, facilitate that? Because we are in this position that we're in. And I'm not putting the onus on you, but I'm just saying, you're making strides and, putting out things that you want to help get involved in, and then how can you help us push the lever to get everybody in the room together to have a productive discussion about what we can do moving forward.
It's a very good, well-phrased question. I'm very impressed by the activists in this community. And I would say that you have a very good leg up on how to make that happen by people like Brian, people like Liz, and others in the community that they really care about what happens. And what I like about both Brian and Liz is that they both seem to have goals. That's an important aspect of what we're doing here, is not just to get up and complain about Clean Harbors, because actually Clean Harbors is doing a pretty good job. But rather to have goals. I know Brian has a goal that he'd like to improve the water quality of the basin, and Liz has other goals that she wants to improve the planning and the evacuation, and somehow get the industries together. And I think that these people in this room are the key to making that happen.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'd just like to recognize that Senator Keenan was here tonight. And I don't think that there was any other, well, except Liz. I'm sorry, Liz. Of course, Liz is here all the time, and she probably gets overlooked a little bit because she is, but a lot of this wouldn't have been happening without Liz, so I really thank her as well. As Tom mentioned, I wanted to, one long-term goal I have is to bring if I had access to my slides, I would have it up on the screen at some point, but right now, the basin has the worst quality on a designation by the state, has the worst quality of anywhere else in the Commonwealth.
Water?
SB asterisk B asterisk. It's at the bottom of the list. Other people have that similar type of water quality, but it's basically because they're a combined sewer overflow impact. That means their stormwater and their sanitary water can combine and flow directly into the river. So that's, they have a strike against them because of that. If they had that removed, they'd have a lot better chance of getting water quality. Ours isn't due to that. Our water quality is due primarily to the historical, you know, industrial basis of this basin, which goes all the way back to the 1800s when they first started to put gas lights in the streets. They had to get that gas from somewhere, and that was, they would take coal in East Braintree at the old Boston Gas Works. They would take coal and gasify it to form natural gas, and that would light the streets and light the homes around that East Braintree village at the time. But they had to get rid of the waste somewhere, and there wasn't someone like Clean Harbors to take it away. So they just dumped it into the river or put it on the, you know, use it to kill weeds, whatever they wanted to do with it. But it was, you know, a lot of it ended up in the river, and we're still dealing with that. But, you know, so I just, you know, got off my high horse. And another thing I like is accurate reports. So, I'm kind of wondering, around the time of 1 to 2 a.m., there was a couple of visits by Clean Harbors employees down to the river's edge, where they noticed that the milky white precipitate, and DEP was with them. They also noticed, you know, somewhere between 1 and 2 a.m. that the site containment was being reached, the ability to contain the water onto the site. So I'm just wondering, I'm looking at a Google photo, which if I had the slide capability, I would put it up, but the Google photo unfortunately shows at least 3 out of 6 trailers backing up into the berm. You know, their back end is over the top of the berm. So my question is, and it all is in the area of where the quote-unquote breach happened.
I'm sorry, can you be clear when you say the Google photo, from what year?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so it's a historic Google photo?
Historic Google photo.
Nothing to do with the actual night of the fire?
No.
Okay.
So, but it shows a practice. It shows a practice of backing those trailers up against the berm. So if it happened on the night of the fire, or if it happened 10 years ago, the berm would still be damaged from those
Right,
things.
you don't even know if those trailers were empty. They may have been empty. So we just don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. So, but empty, or you know, the T-bar in the back is still going to be damaging the berm possibly.
Do you know that whether?
So I'm raising the possibility that the berm might not have been. It might not have been a sudden release at some point. It might have been weakened and damaged to the point where it was just leaking.
Oh, because of the backing up of the trucks.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I would like that to be answered. Was there damage to the berm prior to the night of the fire from the trailers? The other question I have is that when you look at the information in the report, there's not enough detailed topographical information. So I went to the town DPW, and I got the topo map for Clean Harbors property, and it appears that when you back up to the lunchroom grassy area, which you recognize that the water did flow up to that, that's somewhere between the 14 to 16 foot elevation on the topo, closer to the 16 than the 14. The 14 runs around in a bend, but the 16 comes out and around to the other side of the gate. So there's a potential, if it made it to that grassy area, there's a potential that it could have actually flowed out of the gate as well, based on looking at the topo.
Yeah,
So,
can I respond to that?
yeah.
You know, we looked at the signature to determine where the water flowed. We did not see a soot signature out the gate. We did see it along the berm. We saw it on the back wall. You know, you could see a line of soot where the water got to. So, you know, we know that water got to the Sitco property somehow. I'm not really sure it's material as to whether it flowed out the gate or through the berms. Our belief is that it was reasonably well contained and that it was a breach of the berms. And in fact, it was a breach of 2 berms, our berm and also,
If you look at the Google photo, the
yeah.
sicko
I know
berm
what
is
you- I
more
know
a
what
loose
you're
collection
saying.
of
I know
dirt.
what you're saying
Yeah,
about
than
the
a berm.
elevations, and I did
Yeah.
look at the elevations, and I said, oh, yeah, water was up pretty high. So I know what you're saying, and I don't think it really, you know, as much as it's unfortunate that it occurred, remember, this system was not designed to contain, you know, 400,000 gallons of water. And, you know, it was great that it did. And yes, some water was lost, and nobody's denying that.
Does Clean Harbors handle spent lithium batteries?
We do as a company, but we're not permanent to handle it at the Braintree facility.
Okay, because that requires a lot of firefighting water. There's no other real way of putting that out if a lithium battery fire starts going.
Yeah, the only way is a lot of water.
Hi, it's me filming, and I am filming this because obviously the whole town didn't show up. So people can watch this later, which is normally what happens in our public access service. They come and film our PIP meetings. Anyway, Jerry had come up earlier, lives in Idlewell. Some of the photos and some stills of the video I did want to show you, because he, like, you know, he was, these are, I hope you can see them, I can come up closer.
Yeah.
This is when the, you've probably seen all these, this is when it was burning black. It goes up a little, but it just goes straight that way. This is when it was, you know, out and burning light, and it was very definitely horizontal going that way. So I just wanted to show you that. And last question is, can we see the RAM plan? Where is that?
Yes, it's to the people that, well, in both the public announcement, which was published in the paper, and in the PIP group letters that we sent out, both the RAM plan and the IRAC report were, you know, noted, and the web address for both of those is the same.
Okay,
Essentially,
I'll have to
the
ask whoever's
RTN
on that list.
The RTN will bring you to everything that we have developed for the site, and you will be able to click on those documents.
And we can bring up the website
And I-
again if you guys want.
Oh, yeah, that'd be
And
great.
I will-
Thank you.
I will also
Thank you
tell
so
you-
much. Hold on,
Yeah.
hold on.
And I will also tell you that it's a little tricky when you go to the site. You have to go to the far right and click on the thing on the far right. It's not intuitive.
Mhm.
Everybody clicks on the thing and on the actual document, and all they get is the form that we submitted. But if you go to the far right, you will actually get the supporting documents.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
It's also not intuitive that there's multiple pages and you have to paginate down to get to more recent submittals
Okay.
when you're on the website.
Yeah.
We are nearing the end of our time.
For your IT group.
We'll
are there-
bring it back up.
You won't get an argument from me.
What's that? Oh, you're gonna bring it up?
I was going to, it's not allowing me to get back in for a second. I'm gonna try to.
I have to sign in.
We just sent a link to Brian.
Can you hit Control-Alt-Delete?
Oh, I see.
Well, I think it is the clicker interfering with it. It's
Yeah,
multiple USB ports being used and having a conflict.
Pull the dongle out and the mouse might,
Yeah.
the pad might come back.
I had to restart.
I'm gonna reboot it.
So Rebecca will work on trying to get that, while we still have a few minutes left, and I do mean a few minutes. Are there additional questions that people have? Brian, I can't believe I have a question.
Someone pointed out that earlier I was talking about if I had a sample of soot from a roof that got captured in the next rainstorm, would that impact the air modeling? But I actually do have a sample. It's probably about 100 mLs, probably has about 30 mLs of soot/sediment, whatever it is. And it's been diagnosed by an expert that that's probably soot.
Okay, yes, there's, I do.
So would either you or the DEP analyze that?
John?
This conversation is for Clean Harbors.
That's you guys.
Brian, I think we gotta give you, I mean, we would have to
Yeah,
advise on that one.
We'd have to,
Just to be honest.
Brian, we'll talk offline about this and trying to determine the viability of the sample, how it was collected, where it came from.
Does it have cobalt in it? That's all I want to know.
I know that's what you want.
Because I think you can use the cobalt information to plug it back into your air model.
Let me talk to the air modeler as we discussed, and I will.
Well, it also has an impact on whether you should be sampling soil. I think there was another question about sampling soil throughout the basin, and you said it was $800, but here I'm offering you a less expensive way to sort of figure that out. What did you tell me? Cobalt takes $30 to sample?
Could be.
Okay.
Any other questions? No? Well, thank you very much for coming. We did enjoy the meeting, and it was very informative from this end. I hope it was helpful to you. I hope that I made you feel more comfortable about the risk levels that we found in the air emissions. That was my intent during the meeting, and I welcome your questions that you can submit to me to my email address as indicated in the newspaper article and also in the PIP letters and also on the screen here today. Do you want to tell them how they can access this recording, Ms.?
There it is.
I was waiting for an answer, but.
Oh, me? I thought you were
Yes,
talking to Ms.
I wasn't.
Edwards.
We don't.
Yeah, no, I'm
anything
getting a
about
good
it.
shot of this so that people can, I mean, it's a long URL, but it's there.
Oh, I see. Okay. Oh, wow. That's, I guess that's readable.
Yeah.
The RTN number has to be 00,
Yes.
4-00.
Right.
29702.
Okay, thank you.
One way to access this is searchable sites on Mass DEP, and also Mass DEP EOEA portal. If you type in that, is that right? EOEA portal?
The easiest thing, just type in Mass DEP waste sites, and one of the first links will be to our admittedly clunky site that you can find stuff on.
Okay, I usually type in Mass DEP waste site portal, and that'll usually do the trick.
But it's not that number, it's RTN-4-00?
Yes.
No, you don't have to put the RTN part in. It's just 4-00 and then the rest of the numbers. Yes.
That makes a big difference.
It does. It kind of tells you this on the thing because it gives you the number of digits. But if you're not experienced with this, you don't know.
No, I am experienced with it.
Yeah, okay.
Additionally, if you just Google Mass DEP and Clean Harbors, we have a website that has some of this information on it. It'll be the first link that shows up in Google. And from there, you can get one of our internal links that will bring you right to this. So just Mass DEP and Clean Harbors, it'll be your first link.
Yeah, and if there's no other questions, just on behalf of Clean Harbors, we want to thank everybody for participating tonight. We appreciate everyone's active concern and interest in this issue. We're committed to continuing to work towards improved public health and safety of the environment, of the town, and the surrounding area in the Fore River Basin, and we'll continue to do so going forward. And so thank you for coming tonight, and we look forward to continuing to work with everybody and collaborating.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks a lot.
So we would just ask if you have any drinks or anything to just take those out to the front. Yeah. Let me grab that. I'll grab that.
There should have been a bag.
Yes, there is.